Why had they burned it? The question struck her like a blade the moment she stepped into the doorway. Silent, unseen, watching as the fire consumed what little remained of the life she had once lived. The jacket was nothing to them, just another piece of worn-out fabric, a relic buried in dust and neglect. A tattered olive-drab shell, faded canvas, a wool collar rubbed thin by years of cold air and long deployments. To the young soldiers gathered around the barrel, it was trash, something to laugh at, something to feed the flames while they made space in their prefab barracks. But to her, it was more. It was the hand on her shoulder, heavy and firm, when her commander told her, "You've earned this, Nix. Wear it well." It was the smell of jet fuel in her nostrils, the sound of engines screaming against high-altitude air. It was her team, their laughter, their grit, the way they had looked at her as one of their own. And now all of it was ash. The flames curled around the sleeve first, blackening, then erupting into a bright orange hunger. The wool collar shrank and twisted, smoke rising to the ceiling. The patches were gone, long stripped away by her own hand. But their faint outlines, a wing, a shield, a name she no longer dared to carry, glowed ghost-like in the firelight until they too dissolved. She didn't move, didn't shout, didn't demand an explanation. The corporal who had tossed it in was still grinning, waiting for approval from his peers. His shaved head caught the light, his arms thick with strength, his arrogance thicker still. The others chuckled nervously, their laughter faltering when they saw her standing there. Sergeant Anna Voronova. To them, she was no one, just another transfer dumped at a frozen forward operating base on the edge of the world. A woman past her prime, with tired eyes and a duffel bag slung over her shoulder. Her fatigues didn't fit right, and the patch on her sleeve was from a logistics unit that had been shut down years ago. They didn't know what the jacket had meant. They couldn't. And she gave them nothing, not a word, not a flicker of anger, not even the smallest sign of pain. Her boots whispered across the gritty floor as she walked past them, straight to her bunk, sat down, unrolled her gear. The silence that fell behind her was thick, uncomfortable. The corporal looked away first. The others followed, their laughter dying like a candle snuffed out. They thought they'd burned an old jacket. They didn't realize what they had awakened. Colonel Madsen hated mysteries. His office was as precise as his mind. Maps pinned with geometric perfection, files stacked in rigid lines, a stale smell of antiseptic and day-old coffee in the air. He believed in numbers, in things you could measure, marksmanship scores, supply chains, patrol logs. The world was simple that way, clear, predictable. And yet the file on his desk, the one belonging to the woman standing motionless before him, was almost entirely black. 3 pages, 2.5 of them redacted into uselessness. Sergeant Anna Voronova, transfer from the 77th Archival Command, a unit he'd never even heard of. It sounded more like a bureaucratic dumping ground than a place soldiers actually served. No commendations, no deployments, no disciplinary records, just a name, a rank, a ghost. He looked up at her. She was standing at parade rest, eyes fixed on a point just above his shoulder. Her stillness was absolute, like she had been carved out of stone, not rigid, not tense, just unyielding. It made his skin crawl. He tried to break her, threw barbs at her record, implied she was a failure, said she'd been sent here to rot at the armpit of the world. Any other soldier would have flinched, corrected him, defended themselves, something. Her answer was a single word. Crystal. Delivered calm, flat, and empty. It felt less like compliance and more like indifference, as if his words, his authority, barely registered at all. Fine, he thought. If she wanted to disappear, he'd oblige. Logistics, counting crates, inventory, inspecting bootlaces for frays, work that ground people down, stripped them of pride, work meant to erase. She accepted it without question, saluted, turned, walked out. The door closed, And in the silence that followed, Colonel Madsen felt a strange, unwelcome chill creep over him. A sense, impossible to shake, that he had just made a mistake. The warehouse smelled of dust and rusted metal, forgotten equipment piled in dim corners, crates stacked like gravestones. It was punishment, exile, a place where careers went to die. But Anna treated it differently. She worked with quiet, relentless precision. She didn't just stack crates. She organized them by unit, date, and priority. She didn't just count rations. She rotated them, checked heater packs, ensured nothing expired. She found neglected weapons, M4s abandoned in a haze of neglect, and stripped them to their bones. Cleaned them with the skill of someone who had done it 1,000 times before. Calibrated optics. Smooth charging handles until they clicked crisp and clean. By the time she returned them, they weren't standard rifles anymore. They were instruments. Most didn't notice, but one man did. Specialist Vance, a comms tech, quiet, observant, the kind of soldier who watched patterns others missed. He saw her in the mess hall, not eating but studying, watching the squads who they listened to, who they ignored, where the cracks lay in discipline. He saw her late at night in the comms tent, eyes scanning patrol maps, tracing routes through the mountain passes as if committing them to memory. He saw her by the perimeter fence during a snowfall, standing still, watching the wind carve drifts against the wire. He saw her test rifles she had cleaned, her motions practiced, fluid, too ingrained to belong to someone who was just logistics. And he felt it. She wasn't surviving exile. She was preparing for what he didn't know, but it unsettled him. The storm came like a predator. First, just a whisper, a slight drop in pressure. A corporal at the weather station shrugged it off. Then the whisper became a roar. Within an hour, the world outside turned white. Winds clawed at the base, howling like living things. Ice slammed into steel walls. Visibility dropped to nothing. Inside the Tactical Operations Center, the mood was just as chaotic. Their high-ground relay, the Argus system on Raptor's Ridge, had gone dark. No video, no thermal, no seismic data, their eye on the valley gone. And fear began to creep in. They couldn't send patrols. They'd freeze before they reached the mountain. They couldn't send aircraft. The storm would tear them from the sky. The base was blind. The enemy knew it. When Vance reported faint insurgent chatter growing stronger, panic set in. They were out there, moving closer, using the storm as cover. Colonel Madsen paced, boots echoing. Every plan fell apart in his mind. They were trapped. And then the door to the TOC slammed open. Snow swirled in, carried on a blast of frigid wind. For a moment, all they saw was a silhouette. Then the figure stepped inside. Silent, black, unfamiliar gear hugging close to her body, not bulky, streamlined, built for speed, efficiency. A compact carbine slung across her back, goggles glowing faintly, hiding her eyes. Sergeant Anna Voronova. But not the one they thought they knew. She moved past them without a word, boots silent, stood at the main tactical map, where the dead zone glared like an open wound. She raised a gloved hand, pointed, spoke. "The north face. I can be at the relay in 110 minutes." Her voice was calm, certain. It wasn't a suggestion, not even a request. It was fact, delivered like gravity itself. The colonel's mouth went dry. His instinct was to demand answers, to assert control, to tell her to stand down. But the words never came, because he saw it. The certainty in her bearing, the stillness, the quiet that wasn't submission but absolute confidence. This wasn't a ghost from a forgotten unit. This was something else. And as the room held its breath, Colonel Madsen realized his entire command might now rest on the woman he had dismissed. Why was she walking into the storm alone? That was the thought every soldier in the Tactical Operations Center carried as they watched her cross the compound. The storm swallowed her whole in seconds. the snow lashing against steel walls and ripping sound away. She looked less like a soldier than a shadow peeling itself away from the world. Inside, silence hung heavy. No one spoke. No one knew what to say. Then Vance's monitor beeped once. A green dot appeared. It was her, Anna Voronova. Her position, her vitals, her steady heart rate pulsed on the screen. She had handed him the encrypted receiver before leaving. A line, she said, was for the colonel's eyes only. And now, every eye in the TOC was glued to that solitary moving mark. She had left the safety of the base, and was already moving faster than anyone could believe. The colonel stood stiff, arms crossed, his jaw clenched tight. He had half a mind to order her back, half a mind to stop this madness before it claimed her. But deep inside, he knew it was too late. This was already beyond his control. The mountain loomed invisible in the storm, but Anna moved with the confidence of someone who had memorized its bones. Her goggles cut through the chaos, mapping rock faces, wind currents, ridgelines hidden beneath the whiteout. She was climbing not into the storm, but through it. Every step was measured, every handhold deliberate. The storm clawed at her, screaming in her ears, tearing heat from her skin. But inside her suit, her core temperature held steady. Her breathing was calm, even. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't courage. It was something colder, a kind of practiced intimacy with hardship, as though she had walked into storms like this before. Back at the base, the soldiers whispered. "She's heading for the cliff face," one lieutenant muttered, staring at the monitor. His disbelief cracked through in his voice. "That's a vertical climb. You need ropes, anchors, even then it's suicide." Vance shook his head, eyes fixed on her vitals. "Her ascent rate, sir, it's faster than mountain warfare units manage in training, and they're climbing in daylight. Calm weather, He stopped. The word lodged in his throat. But everyone in that room knew it. She wasn't just climbing a mountain. She was rewriting the limits of what was possible. The colonel said nothing. His eyes stayed locked on the screen, but inside his mind was unraveling. He had mocked her, dismissed her, sent her to rot in logistics, and now he was watching her do what none of his trained mountain specialists could. Every meter she climbed stripped away the certainty he had built his career on. Every steady heartbeat made him wonder who, or what, this woman truly was. Anna didn't think about the men watching her. She didn't think about the colonel's doubt. She thought about the fire, the jacket curling into ash, the ghosts it had carried with it. Every pull upward against the rock was another memory she couldn't let go of, faces, voices, laughter long gone. They whispered in the storm, reminding her why she climbed, reminding her that what had been burned wasn't the past itself, only its shell. The storm was an ally. It blinded her enemies just as much as it blinded her comrades below. She became part of it, moving low when the wind howled strongest, pressing flat against the stone when the gusts shifted. Her black gear blended into shadow and ice alike. And when she pulled herself over the final ledge onto the ridge, the world narrowed to a howling void of ice and the skeletal outline of the Argus relay tower. In the TOC, breath held still. "Time?" the colonel asked. "Sir, 109 minutes, Vance answered. His voice was hushed, reverent almost. The colonel exhaled slowly. The green dot had reached the summit, against all reason, against all logic. And for the first time that night, a flicker of hope sparked in the room. The corporal who had burned her jacket stood among the cluster of soldiers at the back. His mouth hung open. He hadn't said a word since she walked into the storm. Now, he stared at the screen as if watching a ghost crawl out of his own grave. Anna crouched low against the gale. Her goggles cut through the storm in layers, thermal signatures, light enhancement, topographical outlines. The Argus tower loomed in front of her, draped in thick ice. She scanned quickly, her mind parsing damage in seconds. The power conduit had been torn, not clean, not explosive, ripped, and the edges glowed faint with signs of heat. Sabotage. She keyed the encrypted comms, her voice calm, clear. Madsen Voronova at the relay, conduit severed, deliberate, beginning repairs. The colonel froze. His throat tightened around words he didn't speak. Sabotage, the enemy had struck already. She dropped her pack, pulled out a portable welder, tools compact and precise. Her gloves worked deftly despite the cold, stripping insulation, prepping damaged lines. Each move was deliberate, practiced. She wasn't learning this, she was remembering. Then her goggles flared. Heat signatures, 4 of them approaching through the storm, moving with confidence, rifles at the ready. Enemy. Her voice came calm across the comms. Colonel, 4 hostiles converging. The TOC erupted in alarm, officers cursed, maps shifted, radios sparked with noise. Voronova, pull back, the colonel snapped. Evacuate, that's a direct order. Silence. Every eye in the TOC turned toward Vance's monitor, waiting for her answer. The pause stretched until it became unbearable. Then her voice returned, cold and sharp as the wind. Negative, Colonel. Asset is critical, engaging. She clipped the welder to her belt, drew her compact carbine. Its suppressor drank the sound. The storm screamed, but her goggles painted the world clear. 4 bright orange silhouettes against the cold blue of snow and rock. They thought they had surprise, thought the storm was theirs. They were wrong. The first moved past an outcropping, scanning empty white. He didn't hear her step behind him, didn't hear the cough of her weapon. He simply dropped, swallowed by the snow. 3 left. They froze, confusion, alarm, 2 huddled close, a fatal mistake. Anna circled, her steps masked by the blizzard. Another cough of the weapon. 2 fell together, lifeless shadows against the ridge. The 4th spun, firing wildly into the white. Muzzle flash flared like lightning. Desperation. Her answer was calm, precise. A short burst, he dropped. 3 beats, 4 dead men. The storm carried their bodies away into silence. Back at the TOC, the muffled thumps of her suppressed fire bled through the comms. No one spoke. They had heard death before, but never like this. Efficient, clinical, cold. The colonel gripped the table so hard his knuckles whitened. She had defied his order, disobeyed in the middle of combat, and yet she had just saved them all. The contradiction twisted inside him, sharp and merciless. Who was she? Anna returned to her work. The last enemy still breathing had cowered behind the relay legs, radio crackling with his frantic voice. She let him be, for the moment. Her welder hissed to life. Sparks glowed bright in the storm, tiny suns born in the dark. Her hands moved with mechanical certainty, splicing, sealing, restoring power. She spoke once more, her tone unchanged, as if none of the violence had touched her at all. Relay repairs underway. The colonel closed his eyes for just a second. Relief and dread twisted together. He didn't know what terrified him more, the storm, the enemy, or the woman he had exiled to logistics. How could she keep working with death so close? That was the question Specialist Vance couldn't shake as he stared at her vitals pulsing steady green on the monitor. 4 enemies lay dead on the ridge. A storm raged so violently it felt like the base itself was shaking. Yet her heart rate barely spiked. Her breathing remained calm, deliberate. It wasn't human, at least not like the rest of them. In the Tactical Operations Center, panic gave way to a different kind of tension. Not the fear of enemies in the storm. Something more unsettling. The fear of what or who Anna Voronova really was. The colonel paced like a caged animal. His boots clanged against steel decking. His men watched him, waiting for answers he didn't have. Finally, he snapped at the comms officer. Find out who she is. Sorry. Break her file. Override security. I don't care what codes you need to use. I want to know who the hell I just sent up that mountain. The young warrant officer paled. Sir, that level of clearance. Do it, the colonel's voice was ice. That's an order. On the ridge, Anna's goggles glowed faint. The storm carved screaming tunnels of wind around the steel skeleton of the relay tower. Her plasma welder hissed, sealing the conduit inch by inch. Sparks lit her hooded figure in bursts of orange against the white fury. Behind her, the last insurgent crouched in terror. He had seen his comrades vanish in silence, one by one. Now he pressed himself against frozen steel, radio clutched to his lips. His voice shook as he begged for help no one could send. Anna knew exactly where he was. She didn't need to turn. The storm carried his fear to her like a scent. She spoke without looking. "You have one chance. Drop your weapon." Her voice was steady, almost gentle. The man froze. His eyes darted through the blizzard. How did she know? She hadn't turned, she hadn't looked. He tried to steady his hands, raised his rifle. Desperation won over fear. He fired. The shot went wide, carried by the wind. Anna spun not with the welder but with a sidearm that had appeared in her hand as if conjured from shadow. One suppressed pop, clean, final. The last orange silhouette on her goggles winked out. She turned back to her work without pause. "Hostiles neutralized," she said over comms. "Relay coming online now." Her voice was ice against the storm's roar. The TOC exploded in motion. Screens flickered once, twice. Then the black void that had been Raptor's Ridge came to life. Clear, high definition. The Anvil Valley unfolded in crisp detail, storm winds breaking just enough to reveal the landscape below. Movement detection flickered back on. Thermal grids pulsed. Their blindfold was gone. A ragged sigh swept through the room. For the first time in hours, men allowed themselves to breathe. But the colonel didn't look at the valley feed. His eyes were locked on the comms officer's screen. The young warrant officer had done it, breaking override after override, bypassing layers of security no one had any business touching. His face was pale, his lips trembling. "Sir, read it." The room fell still, every ear strained for the words. The comms officer swallowed hard, his voice shook. "Top secret, code word protected, Project Chimera, operative designation Nix." A cold silence blanketed the TOC. The colonel's jaw clenched, his eyes darkened, the name hung in the air like a specter. Project Chimera. It wasn't real. It wasn't supposed to be. Just rumors whispered in classified briefings. Myths told to junior officers about a ghost program, operators so deep in black budgets that even their existence was deniable. Ghosts you sent when you couldn't send anyone else. And now one of them was here, in his base. Nyx, the goddess of night, shadow, a name that sent a ripple of unease through every man in the room. They turned their eyes back to the monitor, watched the green dot descend from the ridge, slow, deliberate. They had mocked her, laughed at her, burned her jacket, and all along they had been living beside something they couldn't begin to understand. Anna's descent was silent. The storm began to break with the first edges of dawn, pale light stretching over endless white. Frost clung to her black suit, giving her the look of a statue carved from ice. She didn't hurry. Every step was measured, purposeful. At the base, word had spread. Soldiers lined the paths without being ordered, drawn by rumor and the weight of something greater than curiosity. They had heard the comms chatter, heard fragments of gunfire through the storm, heard her voice, calm, steady, unyielding. When she passed through the gate, no one spoke. They simply stepped aside. She walked through the compound, a solitary figure in black against the pale dawn, tools still clipped to her belt, goggles rimmed with frost, her stride steady. Work crews dropped what they were doing, soldiers filing from the mess froze mid-step, conversations died. No applause, no cheers. The moment was heavier than that. It was respect, silent, profound. The corporal who had thrown her jacket into the fire stood among them, his throat dry, his face pale. He couldn't meet her eyes, couldn't breathe as she walked past him, the weight of shame crushing his chest. Colonel Madsen waited outside the command center. His breath frosted in the air. His cap sat straight, his posture rigid, but inside he felt hollow. She approached, her boots crunching softly in the snow. Frost clung to her hood, her face still hidden behind goggles. The silence stretched, thick with all the things he wanted to say. He could reprimand her, demand answers, assert authority. But none of it would mean anything, not anymore. She had defied him, broken protocol, saved his command, revealed herself as something far beyond the reach of his rank. He was a man built on order, but even he knew when order had been surpassed. Slowly, deliberately, Colonel Madsen raised his hand to the brim of his cap and saluted her. Not the casual salute of a superior to a subordinate, but the rarest kind, a salute of respect, from one soldier to another, from a commander who had been humbled. Anna stopped. For a heartbeat she watched him, then gave the smallest nod, not a salute, not submission, just acknowledgement. Then she walked past him without a word, leaving him frozen in place, his hand still raised, saluting the ghost who walked among them. Her room was silent. The operational suit lay disassembled on a towel, each piece cleaned of frost and grime. Her sidearm lay in pieces across cloth, each part wiped, oiled, set in careful order. It was ritual, cleansing. The violence of the ridge bled away with every motion, replaced by the stillness of discipline. A soft knock at her door. "Enter," she said. Specialist Vance stepped inside, awkward, holding a steaming mug. His hands trembled slightly, but he didn't back out. "I thought you could use this, Sergeant." He didn't call her Nix, didn't mention Project Chimera. He called her by the rank she wore here, the name she had chosen for this place. She accepted the mug. Its warmth seeped into her fingers. "Thank you, Vance," she said softly. He nodded, unsure of what else to do, and stepped out, closing the door behind him. Anna sat alone, sipping the bitter black coffee. Her reflection stared back faintly from the window, tired eyes, lines carved by years, but steady, clear. The memory of her jacket burning flickered in her mind, a relic turned to ash, a severing cut from her past. But the past wasn't a jacket, it wasn't cloth. It was discipline, it was the skills they had given her, the warrior they had forged. That was their legacy, that was what lived on. And as she finished cleaning her weapon, reassembling it with a final satisfying click, she understood. Her old jacket was gone. But she had earned something new tonight, something no fire could destroy. Respect. Why couldn't they look her in the eye? That was the question that hung unspoken across Fob Kestrel in the days after the storm. Soldiers who had once laughed at her now went quiet when she passed. Conversations faltered, heads lowered. Even those who hadn't seen her in the TOC had heard the whispers spreading like fire through the base. She had walked into the storm alone, climbed the ridge no one else could, killed 4 insurgents in silence, restored the relay. And she had come back untouched. Not in body, frost rimmed her gear, fatigue lined her face, but untouched in spirit. She carried herself as if the blizzard, the climb, the violence had been nothing more than another chore in the endless rhythm of survival. That unsettled them most of all. Anna didn't change her routine. She reported to the logistics warehouse each morning the same as before. She stacked crates, rotated rations, tuned rifles. She sat alone in the mess hall. She studied maps in silence. But the atmosphere around her shifted. The same soldiers who had mocked her now worked harder when she entered the room. Their jokes died in their throats. They stole glances at her, not with derision, but with the uneasy respect one gives a predator sharing the same cage. The corporal who had burned her jacket avoided her altogether. His swagger evaporated. His laughter no longer echoed in the barracks. He slept poorly, waking in sweats. Her silent figure burned into his memory. He had thrown a piece of her past into the fire and learned too late what kind of ghost he had stirred. Anna noticed. She noticed everything, but she said nothing. She carried no grudges, no demands. Silence was her weapon, sharper than any reprimand. Colonel Madsen felt the change most of all. He couldn't stop thinking about the salute he had given her, about the eyes of his soldiers as they watched, the weight of what it meant. He was a man who lived by the book, by rules etched in stone. Command flowed from rank, from authority, from order. But what did any of that mean when a soldier walked among his men who existed outside the chain? Someone who could save them all or doom them, with choices that didn't answer to him. He told himself he should write a report, send word up the chain. But what would he write? That a ghost had been hiding in his logistics department. That Project Chimera, a myth even generals dismissed as rumor, had bled into his command. No, that wasn't something you wrote in a report. That was something you buried. And yet he couldn't bury what he felt when she had defied him on the ridge. That sharp anger, yes, but beneath it, a deeper shame. She had done what he could not. She had saved his base not by following orders but by breaking them. It gnawed at him. Specialist Vance carried the weight differently. He found himself watching her more closely after that night, not with suspicion, but with quiet recognition. He had been the first to notice she was different, the first to see her prepare while others ignored her. Now he saw how she carried herself, the way she never sought their eyes, the way she moved through the base with purpose but without pride. She didn't seem hungry for recognition, didn't seem to want it at all. And yet the respect she had earned clung to her like armor, not shouted, not demanded, but undeniable. One evening he found himself walking near the perimeter fence. Snow drifted against the wire, wind whispering through gaps. He saw her there again, standing still, scanning the horizon. He hesitated, then stepped closer. "You don't sleep much, do you?" he asked. She didn't turn, didn't answer right away. Finally she said, "Sleep comes after the work is done." Vance frowned. "You think the work will ever be done?" A pause, her breath fogged in the cold. "No." She didn't say it bitterly, just truth spoken like stone. The base shifted in subtle ways. Patrols moved with sharper discipline. Weapons gleamed cleaner. Even the mess hall grew quieter, conversations subdued. Anna never ordered it, never spoke of it, but her presence alone demanded it. The young soldiers began to treat her like a talisman. They didn't sit with her, but they sat closer than before. They didn't speak to her, but they spoke softer in her presence. She didn't need to be their leader. She was something else entirely. A reminder of what they should be, of what they were afraid they were not. The colonel wrestled with it alone. At night in his rigid office, he stared at the crest on the page the comms officer had revealed, a three-headed chimera. Beneath it the words fully autonomous, disavowable. It chilled him. He had thought command meant control, that his rank meant his word was final, but Anna Voronova had shown him a different truth. Authority wasn't always earned by rank. Sometimes it was carved in silence, in sacrifice, in walking into storms when no one else could. He hated it, hated how much he respected her, hated how much he feared her. Anna cleaned her gear each night as if nothing had changed. Her hands moved steady, meticulous. The discipline wasn't habit, it was survival. The black suit that had startled the TOC now lay folded neatly, its fibers knitting themselves back together. Her sidearm gleamed. Her rifle sat ready. The storm was over. The relay was alive. But she knew better than anyone that quiet was only temporary. The enemy would come again. The storm had been cover. Next time it might be something else. And when it came, she would be ready. Vance brought her coffee again a few nights later. He lingered in the doorway this time, uncertain, but unwilling to retreat. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. Her eyes lifted from the weapon in her hands. "Regret what?" "Being what you are," he hesitated. "Nix." Her face was unreadable. She set the rifle down, her hands folding loosely in her lap. "My name here is Sergeant Voronova," she said. The way she said it carried no anger, no sharpness, just a line gently drawn. Vance nodded. He understood. She had chosen who she would be here, not a ghost, not a code name, a soldier. "I'm glad you're here," he said softly. For the first time her expression shifted. Not much, just the faintest trace of something warmer in her eyes. "Get some sleep, Specialist," she replied. He smiled faintly, saluted her and stepped out. Anna sat in silence, staring at the faint reflection of herself in the window. For a brief moment, the tired face staring back at her seemed less alone. The mountains loomed dark against the horizon, their ridgelines sharp as knives beneath the pale sky. Snow whispered against the wire. The base went on as it always had. Radios buzzed, trucks rumbled, boots crunched in snow. But something fundamental had shifted. They no longer looked at her and saw a replacement, a problem, a ghost. They looked at her and saw something else. A reminder that storms could be faced, that fear could be endured, that strength didn't always shout, sometimes it simply acted. And though no one said it aloud, every soldier at Fob Kestrel knew the truth. They had been blind once. They would not be blind again. Because somewhere in the shadows of their base, a ghost watched over them. Silent, patient, waiting. Why did silence follow her everywhere? That was the question soldiers began to ask in the quiet spaces between duties. In the mess, her tray untouched while others ate in hushed tones. On the perimeter, her shadow moving against the wire, scanning the dark while others smoked and joked nervously. Even in the warehouse, where the thud of crates and the scrape of boots dulled the day, her silence pressed against them until even laughter seemed wrong. They called her Ghost now, though not to her face. The word carried less insult than reverence, but it unsettled them still. Because ghosts weren't supposed to walk among the living. Colonel Madsen couldn't shake her from his thoughts. He had convinced himself that after the storm, after the relay, things would return to normal. He would reassert control. She would fade back into logistics, the legend forgotten, the chain of command intact. But that was fantasy. He saw the way his soldiers looked at her now, saw their posture stiffen when she passed, saw the guilt carved into the corporal who had burned her jacket. Authority had shifted, and not by his order. He hated it, hated that her silence carried more weight than his words, hated that when he gave commands, soldiers glanced first to see if she was listening. He had built his life on control, on rules that bent to rank, but she was proof that control could be broken by something deeper, earned not by title but by action. And it gnawed at him every night. Anna noticed the changes, she always noticed. But she didn't court them, didn't seek to lead, to command. Her place remained the warehouse, the mess, the perimeter fence at night. Yet silence carried its own authority. Young privates began mirroring her routines, cleaning weapons with more care, rotating rations properly, studying maps longer, not because she told them to, but because they saw her do it. Her discipline spread like fire in dry grass, invisible, irresistible. And though she never asked for it, she carried the burden of it all the same. Because silence, too, has a cost. Specialist Vance wrestled with his own questions. The name still echoed in his mind: Nix, Project Chimera. Words meant for intelligence briefings, not for the frozen dirt of Fob Kestrel. He had seen her climb a cliff in a storm that should have killed her, seen her fight with precision beyond anything human. But what unsettled him most wasn't what she could do, it was how she carried it. She didn't boast, didn't lean into fear, didn't even acknowledge it. She just worked quietly, alone. And Vance began to wonder, was that strength, or was it loneliness? One night he found her again near the fence. Snow drifted in silence. He approached, heart pounding. "You ever get tired of it?" he asked softly. Her head turned slightly, goggles catching faint starlight. Tired of what? Carrying it all alone. For a long moment she didn't answer. Then, "It's easier than letting someone else carry it for me." The words cut through him, simple but heavy with truth. He nodded, unsure of what to say. He wanted to tell her she didn't have to, that she wasn't alone here, but he stayed silent. Maybe she already knew, maybe she didn't want to. The mountains watched in silence, sharp ridges black against the stars, but trouble brewed beyond their sight. The enemy hadn't vanished with the storm. The warlord who stalked the valleys hadn't forgotten the base. If anything, the failed sabotage had only hardened his resolve. And whispers began to reach the base. Intercepted transmissions, supply convoys ambushed farther out, civilians fleeing villages with stories of shadowmen moving through the snow. Signs, warnings. The colonel read each report with mounting dread. Another storm was coming, different this time, not of ice and snow but of blood. And he knew, though he hated himself for it, that when it broke, he would look not to his officers, not to his manuals, but to her. The ghost he had tried to bury. Anna sat in her barracks late at night, the pieces of her sidearm laid neatly before her. Her hands moved slow, precise, cleaning, assembling, breathing. Her mind wandered back unbidden to the fire, to the jacket curling to ash, to the faces stitched into its memory. She had told herself it was gone, that she had let go, but ghosts clung tighter than cloth. She remembered their laughter, their trust, their hands pulling her into the team, all gone now. Her chest tightened, but her face didn't change. The silence around her swallowed the ache. Sometimes, she thought, silence was both shield and prison. Colonel Madsen drank stale coffee in his office, staring at the crest printed in black ink, a three-headed chimera. He thought of her eyes when she defied him, thought of the salute he had given her against every instinct. What haunted him wasn't her skill, it wasn't her secrecy. It was how much he respected her, how much he feared he needed her. And for the first time in his career, he wondered if the uniform on his shoulders meant anything at all. Life at the base carried on. Trucks rumbled in and out. Patrols trudged into the valleys. The mess served bland food. The heater in the barracks rattled against the cold. But the silence lingered. Not absence of sound, absence of ease. Every soldier felt it, knew something was coming. And though no one said it aloud, they all looked in their quietest moments toward the warehouse, toward the ghost who had walked into the storm and come back. Because whatever came next, they knew one thing. If the mountains swallowed them, she would be the last one standing. Anna lay awake long into the night, her rifle resting against the wall. Snow whispered against the tin walls of her barracks. The silence pressed heavy, but she didn't fight it. Because silence wasn't emptiness. It was weight, memory, the voice of all she had lost. And she carried it alone. For now, why did the valley seem too quiet? That was the question Specialist Vance asked himself as he leaned over the comms board, scanning the waves for anything familiar. The Argus relay had been restored, the valley feed sharp and clear, but the silence unsettled him more than static ever had. No chatter, no movement, no heat signatures. The enemy had disappeared. And that was never good news. Reports trickled in. A patrol found an abandoned village, food still on tables, fires still smoldering. Another convoy never arrived. A squad searching for them found only scorched earth and footprints disappearing into the snow. Then came whispers, carried on civilian tongues. The warlord was gathering, not just men but something else. New weapons, new tactics. Shadows moving in the mountains. Colonel Madsen read every report with the weight of inevitability pressing harder against his chest. He had known this would come. The storm had been only the beginning. And when it broke, they would not have warning. They would be drowned. Unless he hated the thought before it even formed. Unless he turned to her. Anna already knew. She had watched the reports pile up, read them in silence during her late nights in the comms tent. She had seen the patterns before anyone else, traced them with her finger against the valley maps. The warlord wasn't hiding. He was preparing, testing, bleeding the land dry before he struck. The jacket burning had cut her past loose. But this gathering storm pulled it back into her chest like a knife. She didn't want the fight, didn't want to be Nyx again. But she knew better than anyone. Silence before the storm was never peace. It was warning. The soldiers felt it too. Every bootstep seemed heavier, every patrol sharper, eyes darting to ridgelines. Laughter vanished. Sleep grew shallow. Even the corporal who once mocked her now walked the base with haunted eyes, chewing the inside of his cheek bloody. They all felt it. The storm was coming back. And this time it would not be snow and ice. The colonel wrestled with his pride until it nearly broke him. He sat at his desk, the crest of Chimera staring at him from a sheet of black-inked classification. His hand hovered over the comms line more than once, ready to call her in, ready to demand answers, ready to put words to the weight choking his command. But each time he stopped. What would he say? That he needed her, that without her they were doomed. His pride burned like acid in his throat. But when the first red alert sounded movement in the valley, dozens of heat signatures cresting ridgelines, his pride shattered. He sent for her. Anna walked into his office as if she had been expecting it. Her fatigues hung loose again, her goggles absent, her expression calm. Madsen stared at her, words twisting inside him like barbed wire. "Reports confirm massing enemy forces," he said at last. His voice sounded brittle even to himself. "They're moving on the valley. If they break through the outer ridges, we'll be trapped." She said nothing, just stood there waiting. His hands tightened on the desk. "You've done things no soldier here can explain," he said. "You've saved this base once, and I need to know if you can do it again." Her eyes lifted, steady, unreadable. "Sir," she said evenly, "my duty is the same as anyone's, defend this base, protect its people." Her words gave him no comfort, but the way she said them, calm, absolute, made his chest tighten. "Then tell me," he asked quietly, "what do we do?" Anna stepped closer, leaning over the map. Her gloved finger traced ridgelines, patrol routes, valleys the colonel had studied for months but never truly seen. "They'll strike here," she said, tapping a contour. "Fast, hard, they'll want to blind us first, then breach the wire, but they'll underestimate us. They don't know I'm here." The words chilled him. She said them not with arrogance but with certainty. The colonel nodded once, slowly. "Then we fight." The base shifted overnight. Under Anna's silent influence, routines sharpened into survival. Soldiers who once dragged their boots now checked weapons twice. Crates of ammunition appeared stacked in neat rows near firing points. Tripwires were laid where no patrol had ever thought to place them. She didn't bark orders, didn't shout, didn't lecture. She simply moved and others followed. Her silence commanded more than words ever could. Vance watched it unfold with awe and unease alike. He saw privates copying the way she sighted down a rifle, saw sergeants adjusting defenses because she had walked their line once and shaken her head. The base wasn't becoming hers, but it was becoming sharper because of her. And Vance couldn't help but wonder, if she had always been here, how different would they all be? The night before the attack, Anna sat alone in her barracks, her suit laid out across the bed. The black fabric seemed to drink the lamplight, shadows within shadows. Her hand rested on the collar, where frost still lingered faintly from the ridge. She remembered the jacket that had burned, remembered the faces stitched into its memory. They would not have wanted this for her, another war, another storm. But she had no choice. Some storms you didn't walk into because you wanted to. You walked in because no one else could. Dawn broke pale and cold. The Argus relay lit with movement. Dozens of signatures swarmed the ridges, pressing forward with ruthless speed. The valley became a furnace of heat marks, hundreds moving in waves. The TOC erupted in motion, orders shouted, maps adjusted, radios sparking with desperate calls. And then the door opened. Anna stepped inside, clad once again in black, hood drawn, goggles glowing faintly, her carbine slung, her sidearm holstered. The room fell silent. Every soldier turned. Their panic ebbed, replaced by a quiet, uneasy steadiness. The colonel looked at her, his jaw tight. He gave a single nod. And Anna, without a word, turned to the map. The storm had come back. And she would walk into it again. Why did the first shot feel like the world breaking? The valley had been silent at dawn, snow glowing pale under weak sunlight. Then came the cracks, sharp, distant, followed by a ripple of fire across the ridgeline. The enemy had arrived. Within minutes, the perimeter lit with muzzle flashes. Bullets tore into wire, kicked dirt into the air. Mortars whistled down, shaking the ground with dull thunder. The mountains spat fire and Fob Kestrel braced to survive. Colonel Madsen stood in the TOC, jaw clenched, listening to overlapping reports crash across the radios. Perimeter 1 engaged. Perimeter 2 requesting ammo. Casualties incoming. He gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles whitened. This was the storm he had feared, not of snow, but of fire. He turned and saw her. Anna stood at the map, goggles glowing faint, her calm steady against the chaos. She didn't shout, didn't argue. Her gloved hand traced the valley lines. "They're testing us first," she said evenly. "Probing, the real push comes soon." Her voice cut through the noise like a blade. Officers fell silent, listening. Even Madsen, pride burning in his throat, leaned closer. She turned, her voice lower. "I'll hold the East Ridge." Madsen almost snapped back, almost told her she was a sergeant, not a commander. But he stopped, because he saw the faces of his men, the way they looked at her, steadier now, anchored by her calm. He swallowed hard, nodded once. "Go." Anna moved through the base like a shadow given purpose. Soldiers stared as she passed, weapons ready, hearts pounding. Some reached out, wanting to say something, anything, but her silence swallowed words. She reached the outer gate, frost glittering on her black suit. Her carbine hung ready. Her goggles flickered as data fed through them, painting the valley in layers of light and heat. The corporal who had once burned her jacket stood guard at the wire. His rifle trembled slightly in his hands. When she passed him, he snapped straighter than he had in weeks. His voice cracked. "Good hunting, Sergeant." She didn't reply, just gave the smallest nod before slipping into the snow. He watched her vanish, shame and awe warring in his chest. The East Ridge was alive with fire. Enemy squads moved low, darting between rocks, rifles spitting bursts into the wire. Anna slipped into them like water into cracks. Her carbine whispered soft, suppressed coughs lost in the chaos. One enemy dropped, then another. She shifted constantly, never where they expected, her figure melting into shadow and snow. To her goggles, the battlefield was clean, orange heat marks against cold blue. She didn't waste rounds, didn't miss. Each shot was a cut, slicing the assault thinner, bleeding momentum away. Soldiers on the line caught glimpses of her, a black figure rising from the storm, rifle flashing, then gone again. Some swore she wasn't real at all, that she was the storm itself. But their fear bent into courage. They fired straighter, moved faster, because if the ghost fought beside them, maybe they could endure too. Specialist Vance relayed her position in the TOC, watching her green dot weave across the map with impossible speed. "East Ridge holding," he reported. His voice trembled not with fear, with awe. "She's cutting through them." Madsen stared at the monitor. Every second he expected her vitals to spike, to fail, for her to vanish like smoke. But they held steady. He wanted to hate her, wanted to resent her for defying him, for existing beyond his reach. But watching her hold the ridge, saving his soldiers where his orders could not, all he could feel was a hollow, painful respect. She was everything he was, everything he could never command. And he feared what that meant for him. The warlord's men pressed harder. Waves crested against the wire, shouting through the snow. Mortars thudded into the compound, shaking barracks and scattering dirt. The base teetered on collapse. Medics dragged wounded through mud. Ammunition ran thin. The TOC lit with desperate voices. But still she fought. Anna shifted positions with surgical speed, climbing rocks, cutting angles. Her rifle spat precision, her sidearms snapped in silence. She was everywhere and nowhere all at once. The corporal on the line stared in disbelief as she slipped past him, down into the snow where enemies crawled. Seconds later, 3 silhouettes fell, their rifles clattering. She reemerged, silent, frost clinging to her hood. He whispered under his breath, as if to himself, "She's not human." But when her goggles turned his way, he saw something in them not inhuman at all, just burdened, carrying more than anyone should. He never forgot it. Vance's voice cracked through the comms again. "Colonel, we've got heavier signatures. West Valley moving fast, vehicles." Madsen's blood ran cold. If armor reached their wire, they were finished. He looked at the map. His men scattered, wounded, bleeding. His defenses stretched thin. Then her voice came, calm, steady. "I'll take them." Every head in the TOC snapped toward the speaker. "Voronova," Madsen barked, pride fighting fear, "that's suicide." "Silence." "Then it's necessary." And before he could argue, her green dot peeled from the ridge, moving faster than seemed possible, cutting across the valley toward the incoming wave. Anna moved low, fast, her breath steady in the cold. Her pack clinked faintly, compact charges, tools she had carried for years, weapons meant for ghosts. Through her goggles, she saw the vehicles cresting the ridge. Old armor, patched with scavenged steel, bristling with mounted guns, enough to rip through their wire like paper. Her heart didn't race, her hands didn't shake. She had done this before, too many times. And each time it cost her a piece of herself. But there was no one else. She slid into position, snow soaking her knees, carbine slung, pulled charges from her pack, worked with methodical speed. The first vehicle roared closer. She waited, silent, then rose from the snow like the ghost they feared. The blast lit the valley with orange fire, steel shrieked, men screamed. She moved again before the flame died. Another charge, another blast. The TOC erupted in disbelief as vehicles winked out one by one, green dot moving faster than their eyes could follow. "Colonel," Vance whispered, voice trembling, she's stopping armor alone." Madsen stared, words dead in his throat. His command, his soldiers, his life, all of it balanced on the shoulders of the ghost he had tried to exile. He felt pride twist into shame, fear twist into gratitude. And in that moment he understood. He wasn't commanding her. She was carrying them all. The valley burned, gunfire echoed against stone, smoke smeared the pale sky. But the wire held. Not because of numbers, not because of rank. Because one woman walked into the storm again. Silent, steady, relentless. And every soldier who watched her fight understood a truth they would never forget. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why did victory feel like loss? The valley lay silent at last. Smoke drifted in slow ribbons across snow scorched black. Vehicles smoldered. Bodies lay frozen where they had fallen. The echoes of gunfire faded into the mountains, swallowed by the endless cold. Fob Kestrel still stood, the wire held. The enemy had broken and scattered. But silence now was heavier than the storm. Medics moved fast, dragging wounded through mud and ice. Stretchers lined the aid station, groans and shouts filling the air. Soldiers stumbled through smoke, eyes hollow, rifles dangling at their sides. Colonel Madsen stood in the TOC doorway, staring out at his base. His base. The place he had commanded with pride, with rules, with order. And yet tonight he knew the truth. He had not saved it. She had. His chest tightened with a mixture he could not name: shame, gratitude, fear. They tangled together until he couldn't separate one from the other. Then he saw her. Anna walked back through the gate as if returning from another world. Frost clung to her hood, soot blackened her gloves, the faint glow of her goggles fading as she lifted them off. She moved slow, steady, her suit torn in places, smoke rising faintly from her pack. She carried no trophies, no proof of victory. Just silence. The soldiers stopped when they saw her. Every one of them, even the wounded, turned their heads. Conversations faltered, boots stilled. They watched as the ghost who had gone alone into the storm came back again. No one cheered, no one dared. They only watched. And Anna passed through them like smoke, her eyes fixed forward, her expression unreadable. Specialist Vance found her later in the warehouse. She sat at the workbench, stripping her rifle piece by piece, hands moving with mechanical calm. He lingered in the doorway, unsure if he should step closer. "You saved us," he said softly. She didn't look up. "We held the line." "No," he said, shaking his head. "We survived because of you." Her hands paused for just a breath, then moved again. Metal clicked against wood. Vance swallowed. "Doesn't it mean anything to you, what you did?" Finally she looked at him. Her eyes were tired, older than her face, carrying weight he couldn't imagine. "It means they're alive," she said. "That's all that matters." And then she turned back to the weapon, silence closing like a door. The corporal who had burned her jacket never approached her. But that night, as soldiers huddled in the barracks, he spoke softly to the others. "She could have left us," he whispered. "She could have walked away, and we would have died out there." His voice trembled, but she didn't. No one answered, but the silence in the room carried more respect than any words could. Colonel Madsen sat alone in his office, the crest of Chimera spread before him. The Chimera's 3 heads stared back in black ink, the words beneath sharp as knives, fully autonomous, disavowable. He thought of her standing in his TOC, thought of the salute he had given her once against his pride, thought of the soldiers who now looked at her before they looked at him. And for the first time in his career, he felt something he could not write in a report. Humility. He lifted his pen, stared at the blank page, and left it empty. Some truths could not be reported, some ghosts could not be named. The base rebuilt in silence, wire patched, trenches filled, rifles cleaned. But no one laughed like before. The battle had carved something deeper into them. They carried it in the way they walked, in the way they stood watch, in the way they cleaned their weapons with more care. And though Anna never asked for it, never wanted it, every soldier now carried a piece of her discipline. Her silence had become theirs. Vance approached her one last time, before his rotation ended. She stood at the perimeter fence, the valley stretched endless before her. Snow whispered against the wire. "You'll keep fighting, won't you?" he asked quietly. Her eyes stayed on the horizon. "As long as I must." He hesitated. "Doesn't it ever end?" She didn't answer right away. The silence stretched, heavy but not empty. Finally she said, "For some of us it isn't meant to." Her voice was steady, calm. But Vance heard the loneliness beneath it. He wanted to tell her she wasn't alone, that she had given them more than survival, that she had given them something to believe in. But the words caught in his throat. Because he understood, she didn't need to hear it. She already knew. The mountains loomed dark against the pale sky. Shadows stretched across the valley. Snow drifted like ash. Fob Kestrel carried on. Soldiers drilled, repaired, prepared for whatever storm came next. And somewhere in the quiet, a ghost walked among them. Not demanding, not boasting, not even asking to be seen. Just silent, steady, carrying the weight no one else could. Anna sat in her barracks that night, her gear folded neatly, her rifle resting against the wall. She closed her eyes, breathing slow, listening to the silence around her. It was heavy, it was lonely, it was hers. And for now, it was enough. Because sometimes strength doesn't roar. Sometimes resilience doesn't shout. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And in the silence it leaves behind, others learn what it means to endure.